All right, so we are here. We're going to do our first fire today. The heater is done; it's cured, so it's had a couple weeks to dry out, and so we're gonna go through having a first fire, and just kind of wanted to show you guys how this finished out. First thing you're going to do when you have your first fire is you want to check for draft. And the way that you're going to do that is open up this door. Well, first thing you're going to want to open up your damper. For us up here, this is right here. Basically, with the top vent damper, you're just going to push in, and that's going to drop down, and that's going to be open. So now we're looking for draft, and if we open up this door, we would kind of hope to see the flame get pulled in, and we're definitely seeing that. So I don't know if you can pick that up on camera, but basically as we push this in here like this, I pull this over, you can see that flame get drawn right in, which means we have draft. And that's the benefit of having the chimney in the house from the beginning, because if the chimney's on the outside of the house, the chimney's going to be cold, and draft is just the pressure that's created between the difference in temperature in your chimney pipe and the outside air temperature. So if you have an outside chimney with a masonry heater, this is not a good situation, because you don't have the benefit of the standard fireplaces where all the flue gases are going straight up because heat wants to rise and go out the chimney. With a masonry heater, flue gas is going to go up, and in this case, they're going all the way down 6 feet to the bottom, around, back up, and over, and they're not going to make that vertical down travel without draft pre-established. So if you're in a situation like that, where maybe your house has got a chimney, but it's really short here, and you've got like 8 feet on the outside, and there's a ton of cold air in the chimney, you might have to overcome that with like just taking a fan and opening this up and just blow some air in here and just get your house air kind of pumping in there. Because as soon as that chimney pipe gets warm, it will create the draft that you need. All you need is the chimney pipe air inside the chimney pipe to be warmer than the outside air temperature, and you will have draft. It'll be weak in the beginning, but as the fire builds, it gets stronger. So, first fire is 10-pound fire. Most people are kind of impressed how much wood that actually is. So, and with your first fire, you want to cut your pieces up smaller. They're a little bit more like kindling. And you're going to put your biggest pieces on the bottom first. And we're going to light the top of the fire. This is called a top-down burn. And this is how you want to typically have your fires. If you burn from the top down, it's much more efficient. And the reason for that is because when you light a fire, when you have a fire, you're not burning wood per se. So the physics of a fire are, you're heating the wood to the point where it releases its wood form into a gas form, and you're burning gas. And so if you put a little tiny flame on the bottom of this fire, you're trying to take a little tiny flame and you're trying to gasify an enormous amount of wood. If you put that little tiny flame on the top of a fire where you have your kindling, it's trying to gasify a small amount of wood, and so the combustion is much more complete. A lot of ways to do this, but eventually you want to have a couple pieces of newspaper. And then if you can imagine that normally these logs are a lot larger, and your kindling that you're going to put on top, it'll be something similar to this. Because you're going to basically light this, have this little fire that's basically started on top of your big fire. And people that know, you'll hear this in comments on YouTube videos and things too, people that know how to burn efficiently, they will catch it if someone doesn't do a top-down burn. Alright, just want to make sure that your air intake door is open here. This is a see-through, so we got 2 air intake doors because the air all comes in through the frame itself, comes in through here, and then slots that are cut in the door up here. So we want to make sure both of our air intake doors are open. And then we'll light this and see how it goes. Okay, so it's starting to go. It looks like it's doing well. So the basic break-in period is, this is 10 pounds of wood. 10 pounds is what we start with. So we want to do a 10-pound fire, typically on the first evening or morning. We're going to do 10-pound fires for the first day. So if today we have a 10-pound fire, we could have another 10-pound fire tonight. But the goal would be to have a 10-pound fire sometime during the evening. And then in the morning of the following day, have another 10-pound fire. And then that evening, have a 20-pound fire. And then the morning after, a 20-pound fire again. That evening, a 30-pound fire. The morning after, another 30-pound fire. That evening, a 40-pound fire. The next morning, a 40-pound fire. And that evening, a 50-pound fire, and now your heater is fully cured. It's a 5-day process. And the point of that is to try to just keep any kind of thermal shock that might happen from heating things too quickly so that the refractory isn't cracking. If this was a perfect ideal situation, what you would attempt to do is have all of the refractory elevate in temperature 100 degrees every hour for 20 hours and then slowly descend 100 degrees per hour for the next 20 hours until it gets back to room temperature. That would be a full cure. We're not in a laboratory, and so this is what we're trying to accomplish by having a few fires incrementally growing like that. And I would also want to debunk the thought that you want your first fires to burn too slow. There's a lot of people that err on the side of trying to get their first fires to burn too slowly. But if you try to have too cool of a fire that's not burning well for your first fires, the first fire in a masonry heater is the hardest fire you'll ever light. Everything is cold, nothing's ever burnt in here before. You need heat on your side. And so if the first time you light a fire, you're trying to make it a really small, slow burning, you're going to struggle. You're probably going to start to get smoke out your doors and you're not going to know what went wrong. And the point is, it just went too slow. You need this heat to get into the chimney pipe so that you have draft. And as this fire builds, if you create a small fire, the amount of heat that's actually going to get into the chimney pipe is very low, but the fire is still going to grow. And so now you've got kind of a smoldering fire, and as those flue gases travel around, they cool off, and that's the whole point of a masonry heater. And you want them to cool off because that's the heater itself absorbing that heat. So if you start with too cold of a fire, by the time they get in the chimney pipe, it's cold. It's actually cold and it's not going to burn well. So what happens is it just stalls out and you start to get smoke coming in the house. So especially with your first fire, your 10-pound fire, you don't want it to burn super fast. It's not the goal, is to make it burn super fast. But you don't need to slow a 10-pound fire down. There's just not that much heat going in there. You don't need it to be a smoldering fire. Odds are it will burn the way it needs to burn if you just build it correctly and just let it go and don't worry about trying to slow it down. With this fire, this 10-pound fire, you're not going to feel much heat coming out of the heater until you get to your 20 and 30-pound fires. And that's why, you've got a lot of range with one heater. You can do one fire a day, you can do 2 fires a day. You can burn 50, 55 pounds of wood. You can burn 35 pounds of wood, maybe 40 pounds of wood. And that really allows you to kind of control the BTU output that you want with your heater. Once you get below 35 pounds, the amount of, it's really, you might feel some warmth, but it's really just not going to get hot enough to produce heat in the house that's substantial.